Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the webinar for the Pain Society Philosophy and Ethics Special Interest Group. Anyway, so this evening we have a distinguished speaker, is Tim Atkinson. So Tim is an expert by experience. So Tim has suffered from chronic pain for a number of years, 30 years, is it, Tim, you were saying?
More than, yeah.
More than, right.
Yeah. I daren't add it up because
But
it would
here you
remind
are.
me how old I am.
In spite of all that.
Yeah.
So you're a lived experience trainer on the Live Well with Pain's education program for healthcare professionals. So you're a trustee of the charity Pain Concern and the patient rep for the Physiotherapy Pain Association. Right. So you've co-authored academic research and helped create materials for the Flippin' Pain public information campaign. So it's a huge range, isn't it? You're also authored several books and freelance contributor to a number of magazines and newspapers, including The Guardian, The Reader's Digest, The Irish Times, The Daily Mail, and The Times Education Supplement. So the topic for tonight, the title is Suffering in Silence. So I'll hand over to you now, Tim, and off you go. You're going to
Thank
do
you,
share.
Maureen. I am going to share, so I'm really hoping this works. And you have to tell me if it doesn't, but
Oh, yes, looking good.
is that okay?
Yeah,
Right, you can see my screen that I'm sharing, but I can't. Can you still see it? Yeah, brilliant.
yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, so as Maureen has so generously said, I'm an expert by experience. It is not the kind of experience that anyone in our position on our side of the consulting room desk wants to have, but I suppose you do the best with what you're given, the hand you're dealt. And the list of things that I'm involved in has accrued quite accidentally, really, literally from having taught. I was a teacher in a former life, having taught Richard Pell, who went to work as a specialist physio for Connect Health, who are now called Cora, and who are, of course, behind. They finance, they run the Flipping Pain public information campaign. He knew that I'd given up classroom work partly because it had become too physically demanding. We'd kept in touch sporadically, and he said, come along, we're going to have a soft launch in Boston. Lorimer Moseley was there. The rest is history. He gave me some copy editing work, and I ended up going down the rabbit hole of pain self-management, and I'm still sort of yet to emerge. Anyway, that's that. What I actually want to talk about tonight is something a little different and possibly not as positive, because I've been involved in something called the Language of Pain collective, which is run by Trinity Laban University at Greenwich, and it's a very interesting project that's about to sort of come to its conclusion. And so I'm hoping a bit later on to share some of that with you. But I mean, talking of suffering, I don't think we can gloss over the fact that we're all suffering from withdrawal symptoms from the Rydal Hall residential. So I just thought I'd share a few pictures. I hope you can see the lovely building in the middle, the walk on the coffin trail on the left-hand side, the lake on the right, and of course, it's just so gorgeous, and it's such a shame. There we are, all going to the pub with Roger Nags. You're on that picture as well, Nikki, I think, and they're doing Tai Chi on the lawn, swimming in the lake. It's going to be sorely missed, and I really do hope that something good comes out of the hiatus. We'll call it a temporary sort of blip, and hope that it all comes to fruition and we all meet in person next year. Okay, so the language of pain. Here's one of the things that I did that I hope I can share. I hope the technology sort of allows you to hear it, because it was based on a short project that I did, literally trawling through 30 years of my own medical records, or rather trying to analyse the kind of language that was used, the kind of phrases that kept cropping up, and some of the value judgments that underpinned some of the things that were said. Oh, it's after this quote, actually. I meant to say that, of course, the other reason we all remember the lakes so well is that Polly Atkins was there a couple of years ago telling us that illness makes storytellers of us all, whether we want to tell the story or not. Anyway, here's part of my story as analysed and recorded.
So how much pain are you in today? Where is it on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is almost no pain? 10 is the worst imaginable. How much pain are you in today? Where is it on a scale of 1 to 5? Where is it on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is 5 is the worst imaginable pain? You cannot possibly be in that. You cannot possibly be in that much pain. Patient complains of persistent pain in feet, hands, knees, and wrists. Patient denies any improvement. Patient claims pain on GPS of physician pain level 2. Observed to be found. Noted that. Physician claims pain 1. Failure to make patient non-compliant. Patient insists pain is in need despite scans showing no evidence of osteoarthritis. CRP is physician global health. Patient has failed to respond to treatment. Failed to respond.
Okay, that was deliberately audiologically confusing. There were phrases recorded over the top of one another, and if you were listening in stereo and headphones, it may have been even more confusing because it will have come out of different ears at different times. But I was quite shocked by the kind of language that seemed to emerge with alarming regularity. Patient denies, as a record of me telling a physician that a particular intervention hadn't worked, a particular drug that I've tried wasn't having the effects that we'd agreed we were going to try for. Just try. Some of the conversations were conversations that had been had verbally. You've got to fight this. You've got to battle. I'll take your history. We'll send you home. Again, patient denies, patient claims, this is the patient's reality, and this is what I believe, having been told it. No, it's recorded on a letter as the patient claims. And it's all overwhelmingly negative and stigmatizing and normal. And it affects us as patients, and I think it affects people as healthcare professionals, whether we realize it or not. Because, as is obvious from that quote, the environment we work in isn't always obvious to us at the time. Fish don't know that they swim in water. And in case you're thinking this is just my analysis and I'm a bit of an outlier, I did a bit of digging around after I did that little exercise, and I've found in this month's issue of Pain Matters, the Pain Concern magazine, this article on page 17, detailing the same kind of thing. Consultations that confuse and dismiss with phrases like it's all in your head, or you're physically vulnerable, or your pain can be fixed. And there've even been academic studies published in the BMJ that come to the same kind of conclusions. The French philosopher Michel Foucault calls this kind of thing the medical gaze, which comes out of his book The Birth of the Clinic, where he analyses the difference between medical treatment in the 18th and 19th and early 20th centuries. And he says that this is something that's developed, particularly at the end of the 19th century, and which has transformed the patient from a speaking subject into an invisible object. And I'd like to add, given the linguistic analysis that I've just shared, the phrase medical haze to the terminology, because it's the same kind of blur that occurs when you read your hospital notes or when you get that CC'd letter from the consultant to your GP. And it always seems to me as if the language that's being used is shutting a big door in my face. I know that there is a reason for a lot of the precision that is used in these kind of language, these kind of communications, and I realise that it's a language that physician to physician is understood instantly and clearly and can be acted upon. But I think it's also a circumlocution, because what's happening is that power is being taken and held by somebody else, not the patient, and then it's being exerted. As this 2025 sociological report sums up very, very clearly and very, very starkly, medical diagnosis is a complex epistemological practice that simultaneously produces scientific knowledge and exercises social power. There is a bit of a power game going on as far as this language is concerned. I don't think it's possible, even with the best will in the world, to put it all down to simple technical vocabulary that's necessary. There are aspects of it that I think have a hidden agenda that I think we need to consider, and those are the kind of things that the project that I've been involved in has been looking into. Theodore Adorno, ironically, puts the same thing in a very much more straightforward way. He talked about it as jargon. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago where Tamar Pincus was saying very much the same thing. She was entertaining the audience with her usual flair, and she was using a few long, complicated psychological concepts and bamboozling a few people. And then she just gave up. She said, yeah, we love this jargon. We think it makes us look clever, and it doesn't really, because if you do understand a subject, you should be able to explain it as simply as possible. No language is neutral. Words have power, and I think they have an awful lot more power than sometimes some of us give them credit for. In the Bible, God gives Adam dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. And that dominion is expressed in Genesis 2 by God giving Adam the authority to name all the things that fly in the air and creepeth upon the earth. And then Genesis 2 finishes up with this telling phrase, and whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. No argument. You don't like your name, Mr. Elephant? Tough. God gave Adam the right to put that label on you, and that label sticks. Of course, we know that this is talking metaphorically, not literally, but in Christianity, the Saviour, the Messiah, to explain the Greek that has suddenly appeared on the screen, isn't the Son of God, but the divine Logos. That's the Greek there. The divine Logos, the Word made flesh. The Word so magisterially invoked, of course, at the beginning of John's Gospel, which even non-churchgoers, if they pay any kind of attention to any kind of Christmas service, will remember from that magisterial opening. In the beginning was the Word. That's the Word, the divine Logos. In the Hindu tradition, the same thing happens with the great syllable of Om, which is, of course, the catalyst for the whole of creation. This is just an example, probably, of the kind of things that have always existed and have always been there. But just in case you think that this is sort of too much sort of historical analysis, I'd invite you just to consider that it's actually current. It's actually something that we spend a lot of time and attention trying to get right. Time, even today, we don't use words like mankind or chairman or fireman anymore for obvious reasons. And it's more than political correctness gone mad, or, I don't know, rampant correctness.
Sorry, can I just interrupt him? Sorry, can everybody mute themselves? I thought I had done that, but sorry.
Okay, am I still not muted then? Good.
No, don't you mute. No, not you.
Okay.
Maureen, you're the only one not muted.
Yeah, but I wasn't making that noise.
Oh dear, somebody making
total silence in this room.
Oh my word. Apologies. I hope it isn't me shuffling my papers, because I've got
that'll
notes
be it.
written down.
Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Okay, where had I got to? Anyway, it just makes the same point, really, in a different way. How we speak and the words we choose and the things we define when we're talking about any concept, to a large extent, larger than we realise, I think, a lot of the time, determine the way those concepts are dealt with and understood, or in the case of a patient-doctor relationship, perhaps unconsciously or subconsciously determine that clinical relationship. I don't need to tell you guys that you probably sat on hospital committees where the agenda item, the recurring agenda item, is whether or not you just change the label patient to, I don't know, service user or customer, and of course it was a subject of much sort of have I got news hilarity recently, when the prisons minister owned up to preferring the use of the word colleagues to offenders or prisoners. These things are very current, and they're analysed and discussed for a reason. They matter. In short, they matter. And that's what the Language of Pain project, I think, has discovered or has reinforced in my mind over the last 3 or 4 years. It began as a pilot project in 2024, which has now evolved into something more systematic and long-standing, and I'm going to share with you a few of the things that I and one or two others on the team have produced as a result of the investigations that we've done. It's an ambitious title, and it's also slightly ambiguous for a project that works with 9 lived experience experts, because what lived experience of chronic pain tells us, or at least tells me, is that we're constantly struggling to make ourselves clear, or to find the right word, or to get the right word in the right ear. It's something that I've battled with throughout my 30 plus years of being a patient or a customer or a service user. Pain has to be borne stoically. I mean, we know that there is an etiquette to being sick, as Anatoly Broyard says, and we know more than most that we've got to avoid going into too much detail. Sympathy is finite, and pain is almost more problematic perhaps than other symptoms, because everybody gets it, so everybody thinks they understand it. Is your pain the same as my pain? I feel your pain. I mean, I'd invite you just to consider that phrase for its ambiguity. And some people, of course, even claim to enjoy pain on some level. But the capacity to give one's attention to a sufferer, says Simone Weil, the French philosopher, is very rare. And she goes on to say it's almost a miracle, and then finishes up with the sentence, nearly all of those who think they have this capacity do not possess it. And Simone Weil was a patient herself. She suffered a short lifetime of chronic pain herself. Even those of us who you might expect to have the capacity to articulate our pain struggle I've read a book published only very recently by Darcy Steinker, an American author, called Notes from a Body in Pain. I highly recommend it, if only to give a very different patient perspective on a lifetime of treatments, operations and other interventions. But she writes at one point early in the book, and bear in mind this is somebody whose job is expressing herself in words, putting words down on paper. I started to write out pain notes before each appointment with the doctor. Even I, who have spent my whole life as a writer, struggled to communicate with Dr. S. No matter how articulate I was, she could not hear me. She scowled and held her body away from mine, clearly repulsed by my descriptions. The typical pain-related words, aching, cramping, burning, throbbing, had been used so often that they seemed to me to have no vigour or force. English has a limited number of words for pain and few bigger concepts. Germans can use Weltschmerz, I'll say that again, Weltschmerz, a concept that implies world weariness, and the Japanese have wabi-sabi, an acceptance of bodily imperfection. One study, Descriptions of Pain, Metaphor and Embodied Simulation by Eleanor Semino, showed that metaphors are the best way to describe pain. I would tell Dr. S that the pain felt like a nail was lodged in my hip socket, like a hot coal was smouldering inside my buttocks, or that a sparking electrical wire was running down my leg. It made no difference. If that's the experience of a professional writer, you can imagine what other people less skilled in language might suffer. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. It's a project, as I said earlier, run by Trinity Laban under the direction of Dr. Rebecca Stancliffe. And as I said, it evolved from a pilot study which sort of just narrowed down the terms into something that we could really focus on. It involves a group of lived experience experts, of which I'm one, but we work as equals with the rest of the team, the academic researchers and the creative professionals who are there to help give voice to our experience. Because that experience and those voices are too often denied or invisible. And that's where the work we do, hopefully, will come in. We've spent 7 months meeting online and interrogating our understandings of our experience and our orientations towards chronic pain, using a variety of techniques, including, as you'd expect from an arts-based university, somatic informed arts practice and a lot of other things as well. And the project is now coming to a conclusion, which will be presented as a multimedia film in September, Pain Awareness Month, deliberately coinciding with that. And hopefully some of the things that I'm about to share will be integrated into that to make a standalone piece that will both raise awareness of the problem and hopefully suggest perhaps a few solutions. So, arts-based practice. We've painted, we've moved. I couldn't call it dance in any way that does justice to the word. We have made music, we have written, and it's the written word that has been the kind of thing that's come most instinctively, most naturally to me, because that's what I've been doing in a prose capacity for the last 10 years of my career. I'm not a poet. I did write poetry in my teens, very, very bad poetry. And I suppose it did have an effect because it gave me an instinctive ear for the rhythm of speech and written language. And that's helped me in my sort of non-job as a prose writer. But in the safety of the Language of Pain project, in that collective and that supportive environment, I've been tempted to have another go. And so the first thing I'm going to share with you is a poem that I wrote called Numerology. So forgive me, I've given you the the excuses beforehand, but this is the first of my artistic efforts on the course. I am a number, a figure I choose to mean pain, the amount, its severity, degree and intensity. I am the numbers too I count down from a century, or upwards in threes, my displacement activity. I am the numberless days in an opioid haze, the wages unearned, or the benefits claimed. I am the numberless hours sitting waiting my turn to be weighed and measured along with the others. I am the number I choose on your 1 to 10 scale. You insist must be lower because you have the power. So your pain, my pain, cannot quite be that bad. And I grimace and nod and try not to feel sad that a stroke of your pen always changes the tune while I measure my days in the counting of spoons. Numerology was an attempt to try and articulate something meaningful about the fact that all of us on the project are always being asked to think of a number, and most of us have at some point been challenged about the selection we've made. Few people have said that they're sometimes challenged to raise the figure, and most people seem to be victims of the opposite kind of persuasion or pressure to downgrade the number that they've used, which begs an awful lot of questions. I mean, just labelling a complex experience like pain with a number on a 1 to 10 scale is dehumanising in the first place. It's a gross oversimplification, and I get why it's necessary, and I get why it provides an easy comparison benchmark assessment for the to measure the effectiveness of any subsequent intervention. But is that the best we can do? I'm not so sure. We've been meeting on Zoom, as I said. I've blurred people's faces because I haven't been able to meet with the collective and get their consent, and I've also isolated their names, and we've been a bit creative with that. Zoom is a very limited two-dimensional space, as you can obviously you're all having first-hand experience of now, but it can also be quite a playful space, and we've made use of the fact that we can have Zoom on our phones and move around and share more than just the rectangular screen that we're visible in to other people. And that was one that I thought was quite good, because somebody had taken a picture of a winter tree that we tried to each individually use a tile-shaped image as our background and then move it into position to recreate the overall picture. I don't think we quite got it right, but there are all sorts of things that you can do that I don't know, break that fourth wall, third wall of Zoom, and engage more meaningfully with the people concerned. And that was just a preparation to try and make sure that the subsequent discussions were more valuable. We've also looked at something called masking, and you can see that was taken quite literally, but that came out of a discussion of the fact that we're all, if we're expert at anything, experts at masking our symptoms. You know, we perform to quite a high level as actors when we go out into the world because of what I said earlier about the finite amount of sympathy, and the fact that people will very soon get fatigued of hearing the same old story from a pain patient. So we often pretend, and often succeed very well in pretending that we function more healthily than we do. So we made a mask to represent that, which was another very interesting kind of preparation for some of the bigger work. Because, of course, there's no greater agony, as Maya Angelou said in her autobiography, than bearing the pain of an untold story inside you. And so we're trying to get those stories out, and we're trying to, with some of those more playful preambles, agree on ways that might work and that might help us to develop a shared language that communicates what we need to have heard. There is another quote on the story, on the subject of stories and words, which I'd just like to share from Jeanette Wenterson's recent autobiography, because again it speaks very, very profoundly about the conspiracy of silence. And Winterson, in her case, her belief that fiction and the power of stories gives people who are otherwise denied a voice a means of expressing themselves that they might otherwise find more difficult. So we've done some of that as well. We've looked at creating fictional characters and using our experience to give them a voice that we think represents a hidden truth, not necessarily a literal truth, but a hidden truth. You know, Shakespeare writes plays that bear no relation to historical authenticity, but my goodness, you can't say they're not true, and the truth they speak is a profound truth about the human condition. Joe Moran says something very similar about art in general, and I like the fact that he talks about the necessity of any kind of artistic expression to come and do the heavy lifting when other more normal forms of communication fail. When other routes fail, as he says there, if it were easy to make ourselves understood, there would be no need to paint or make pictures or music or write words. Here's a short fictional exercise that I wrote from the point of view of a character who was a man at the end of his life who'd sold up, left town, booked himself a guest room in a monastery where he intends to spend the last of his days. Persistent pain, being in pain persistently, means little or nothing to those around him. People in pain are expected to grin or grimace and bear it. They're denied the freedom to express their pain because their pain is constant, not infrequent. It lacks novelty. It becomes a given, the norm. And nobody wants to be reminded of what's normal, what never changes, what suffering cannot be alleviated, what problem cannot be solved. And nobody wants to be seen as less of a person, as someone in need of special care, of looking after. And that's why, after all this time, the time has come. Suicidal ideation is supposed not to inevitably lead to suicidal intent, but in him it has. After years of thinking, of idly speculating, wondering, imagining, It has crystallised into a decision, an intention, a plan. Only the details remain to be decided. And the devil is always in the detail. Work of art, drawing by one of the members of the team that, again, I think nicely sums up that feeling of utter helplessness. You may not be able to see, but there's a bottle of pills at the bottom of the pit of pain, and the top's been unscrewed and the pills are all there, but they don't seem to be doing much good. And the ladder, the way out of the pit, so far hasn't made much progress in helping the person escape. If we're still okay for time, Maureen, I'm just going to play 3 short extracts that I recorded for Rebecca Stancliffe to present at a conference that she attended in Leeds in January, where some of the preliminaries from the programme were being presented to a cohort of colleagues. So I shall now forget that I put another quote, which is a nice one, but I'll now go to the video and hope that it plays and that you can hear it. So here goes. There are just a couple of these short extracts, but I think they sum up what we've been doing really, really well. And I've given you 1 or 2 examples, and hopefully with what I'm about to say, that'll make the context quite clear. Right, so play, and apologies, we don't seem to be able to get the play button to become visible. I don't know whether that's because it's not it's embedded in the
What about the 3 little dots? Might that have an alter?
No, I don't seem to have the. That's so annoying.
Okay.
Apologies for this.
Don't worry. Is this your Language of Pain project?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's exactly what I was. I'm not quite sure why. None of the buttons that usually.
Oh, don't worry.
Oh my word! I could lose this screen and just share it from YouTube.
Yeah, just tell us. Yeah.
That would be perhaps an easier way of doing it.
Yeah.
Bear with me for a moment, because I think these are also all available on YouTube. Yep. So if I share this again now, and we look at this screen, can you see that?
Yep.
Brilliant. In that case, I've got a play button, so I can play what I was going to play. Here we go. Writes, to witness the moment when pain causes a reversion to the pre-language of cries and groans is to witness the destruction of language. But conversely, to be present when a person moves up out of that pre-language and projects the facts of sentience into speech is almost to have been permitted to be present at the birth of language itself. Moving from pre-language to an articulate and artistic and collaborative expression has been the ongoing quest of the Language of Pain project since 2023. Words are powerful tools, both for defining how we feel and for helping us to understand our place in the world. Those with more words and concepts to describe and distinguish between negative terms tend to be more flexible in dealing with problems. But persistent pain robs us both of the means to communicate and to help ourselves. To have no words, to suffer both pain and verbal isolation, is a burden almost impossible to bear. So how do we move from the cries and groans to the birth of the language of pain that expresses how we feel, who we are, and what we value? It's important to understand that pain is far more than a bodily alarm system triggered only by injury or illness.
Pain, all pain, but especially persistent pain, is more than a mere bodily sensation. Nociceptive signals travel through the brain's limbic system, which controls emotions, thus adding an additional burden to a complex experience which can't be reduced to the enumeration and treatment of symptoms. As patients, we're constantly being asked to rate our pain on scales of 1 to 10 or sometimes 1 to 5, an almost impossible task, which nevertheless often appears as little more than a sop to the so-called patient autonomy when compared to the reality of blood counts or inflammatory factors, scans and x-rays. I've yet to meet a patient who has not at some point heard, "You simply can't be in that much pain," from the other side of the consulting room desk. So, engaging pain patients in a dynamic and open-ended artistic endeavour, giving them autonomy over the process and providing a supportive, collaborative working environment implicitly acknowledges and validates the holistic nature of our lived experience, gives us control of the outcomes, as well as positive emotional feedback that helps turn down the negative feedback loop of our pain channels, and gives us the tools to begin creating our own language of pain.
Okay, I'll stop sharing at that point, and I'll just sum up in a few words, and then leave the rest of the time open for discussion. So, I hope it's been clear. I hope what I've said makes it clear that an awful lot of the clinical medical language that we've interrogated renders patients the object of a physician's action, the passive recipient of somebody else's expertise, whilst at the same time reinforcing a doctor or other healthcare professional's position of power. And I think changing the way we speak could be one of the starting points for changing the way we think, because denying people in pain agency or even comprehension by the language that's used and by the way people are treated and the underlying assumptions that lie behind that runs totally counter to what everybody involved in pain self-management knows is the golden key to unlocking that particular skill in chronic pain patients, which is, of course, agency, which is giving back a sense of control to the person in pain. The irony of this, that I don't know whether it will strike anybody here, the irony is that the language that's used against us is very much the kind of language that we as patients think should underlie a holistic treatment of our pain, rather than a sort of symptomatic sticking plaster patch on whatever happens to be injured. You know, medicine's great at blaming the whole person, at pushing it back to me as being some sort of personality deficiency if I don't respond to treatment that's been empirically proved to work in 9 out of 10 cases. Very good at blaming the whole person while still treating us as isolated body parts that need repair. Holistic medicine isn't something that in my experience is very common in NHS healthcare or in any kind of healthcare. Perhaps you have to go as far as to look into Chinese medicine in order to get that. But the dichotomy between the way we're spoken of and the way our symptoms and treatment plans are spoken of is quite amusing, I think, and quite eye-opening. And engaging with that kind of language through a project like this not only helps us as an individual with agency and collaboration, but I think it also does something on a more fundamental level, which leads to transferable skills. that might be especially relevant, going back to what I was talking about a moment ago in terms of pain self-management, because art is something that scares a lot of people. It's not a surprise to me that most of my contributions to the group have been in writing, even if some of it has been experimental poetry, which I make no claim of expertise in. But I do find it quite easy to pick up a pen or to attack a blank screen with a keyboard and get words flowing. I don't find it easy to paint pictures, to make music, to dance, but other people find these things relatively easy. And the thing that we've been encouraged, I think, to take away from the last sort of 6 or 7 months of working this way has been to overcome that kind of freeze, to learn to relax into what we're doing, and basically, therefore, to accept that by doing it and by persevering with it, it can get better. Okay, nobody on the course is going to become the next Michelangelo or Picasso or Wordsworth or Milton. We're not making any great claims for, shaking up the world of art, but literally, we can see that the things we do, whether that be the poetry we write, the music we compose, the dance moves we choreograph, the pictures we paint, whatever it is, has got better. We've overcome that adult sort of freeze response when taken out of our comfort zone and given something new to do that we might not otherwise have chosen. And I can't really think of a better metaphor, really, for actually getting people to engage and understand that perhaps making small changes to the way they live their lives, perhaps making slightly better health decisions and persevering with some of the things that they've been advised to do, can actually also make them more resilient to pain. So there we are. It's a bit of a smorgasbord of all sorts, but it's being drawn to a conclusion. These disparate threads are being pulled together now in the form of this multimedia film, which I hope you'll all come and watch online. You're all invited, and we're presenting it. I think it's the 20th of September, but I will make sure that message gets shared.
Yes, let me know. Brilliant. So, anybody want to pose a question or? Sarah?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm searching for the hand, but I'll just speak. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. I find that very moving, and also sort of completely recognize the severe limitations within the framework of how we approach people with pain, and again, it's all about scores. It's about the things that you've been describing, and having had some of my own patients who've sometimes been in agony, and one feels from a clinical viewpoint sort of somewhat of a failure for being unable to sort of push a button, do a prescription, provide a solution. I think one of the testing phenomena is it's that. Well, tell me if you think this has got something to bring to the conversation, but it's that joining together. It's a partnership process that maybe is wanting in terms of a search for the individual's maybe multifaceted solution. I mean, I've just got a patient who I'm on that journey with at the moment, and as you know, I tend to try and bring what I have to the table in terms of clinical hypnosis, as well as all of the other things I've been taught to try, which are pharmacological. But this poor chap has had a tongue cancer, and his whole anterior tongue has melted down the treatment. And I think I mentioned him last time as well, but from the point of view of a really, really tricky problem, he's got a very complex type of pain, which doesn't seem to be particularly opiate sensitive. And one of the conundrum I find is that the pain team, who are all nice enough people, have sort of badged that because this isn't definitely a cancer related pain and it's clearly not an opiate sensitive pain, that albeit there are some times when opiates do help him more, but often they do make his mental clarity really suffer. But we have run out of therapeutic options which are medicinal, really. So he's on paracetamol basically. IV, and a bit of ibuprofen. But I think from the point of the armamentarium, we're giving him acupuncture, and I'm trying some hypnosis. But we are actually struggling massively collectively to try and find a solution for him. And I think there's that sort of desperate sense of admixture of failure, frustration, empathy, and powerlessness to be able to effect that change, and actually then to sometimes have to turn to that strategic answer that this is something that has to be somehow lived with, and how we help people to live with doesn't necessarily have a huge armamentarium attached to it, because all the work that you've been doing, I don't think necessarily translates into a community-based prescribing type of solution. Sorry, it took a very long time to get there in the end, but I mean, I don't know whether that is meaningful to other people. But I think often these things evolve as well, and people become more adept at being able to manage it. And with this chap, he's been very lovely and very engaged with trying the hypnosis I have. And it's that question mark about how troubling does a pain have to be to somebody? Because actually there's one thing about the pain being a score, but it's also how bothersome is it to the individual, and how we try and broaden the scope of what we can do for people that actually takes hold of the bothersomeness of it. I don't know whether you have comments to make on that.
Gosh. I think the only comment I'd make is that, one of sympathy for both your position and the poor patient's position. And of course, we're talking about a massive difference between the sort of chronic, lifelong pain that most of the people that I've been working with on this project have, which is, which in some cases has, or I don't know. I'm hesitating now. I can't talk to you lot about minding your language and then suddenly like step into the animal trap of attempting to hint that something like fibromyalgia may not have an organic cause. But there are people with chronic pain conditions like that. I mean, my condition is shows up on scans and has abundant physical manifestations which doctors can touch and see and feel and squeeze and hear me yell and all sorts of things like that. So my experience is an awful lot more straightforward. But the frustration of people who have undeniable pain, chronic pain, not acute pain, of course. We're not talking about the agony of something that's brought on by some sort of serious injury or serious disease, but who have this sort of low-level background noise of pain that never goes away. Somebody described it as being like a sort of a physical manifestation of tinnitus. Tinnitus doesn't stop people hearing or going to concerts or perhaps engaging in conversations with people, face to face. But by golly, it's a darned nuisance and more to have to put up with that 24/7, even at night. And that's the kind of level of pain we're talking about. I think description you gave of your patient there is a very extreme end of the scale, and I'm not convinced personally that any sort of or much of the live well kind of self-management strategies that I advocate in some of the work that I do would be of any help, because they're not designed to address those particularly acute needs.
I mean, I think for our sort of conversations from within, our multidisciplinary group, I mean, I think we've appreciated that, clearly in his situation, there seems to be a largely mixture of the functional neurological, but the neuropathic, as well as the actual sort of anatomic phantom limb type, phantom tongue phenomenon going on. So obviously it does make sense to try and tackle these from lots of different facets. And I'm even thinking there must be an underlying cancer. We haven't been able to biopsy prove that, but should we actually try and treat him? Even if the biopsy that we've struggled long and hard to get comes back negative, should that be I mean, all of these things are sort of desperate, sort of clutching at straws to find some form of solution that's going to get him out of hospital and get his life back. And I think that my personal sort of bedside sort of promise to him is that we're not going to give up. We're keeping on going to try everything and anything that can possibly help, as long as that's agreeable to him. But I think yes, I think these sorts of situations are about empowerment, but I think within the hospital setting, I think actually the hospital setting isn't an empowering place. That's the problem. It's quite the opposite somehow.
And yeah, I mean, I see Nikki's got her hand up as well, but I just to add one thing to that, of course, is I don't know the situation that you've described in any detail, but of course, in my experience, when you are in that hospital setting, you are being treated in a number of different sort of parishes, none of whom speak to each other, and all of whom are competing with everyone else with their elbows out for a bit more of the funding pot, which we know is never big enough in the first place. So that kind of almost inevitable, well, it is inevitable the way healthcare has been structured sort of financially and competitively for the last 40 years. That sort of inevitable silo kind of mentality and inner competition doesn't ever give you a chance of putting the pieces of a human jigsaw together and treating a person as holistically as a human being, does it? And so
giving it my best shot, but
constantly sending people off to different departments for different interventions. It makes you feel like a piece of badly maintained machinery.
Oh, okay, thank you. Nikki, you wanted to?
Yeah, I agree with him completely. And this poor patient, I mean, he's lucky he's got Sarah on side, but I mean, the trouble is in that thing, he's going to be in a massive threat state, and pain is a threat state, and so it's just going to be a sort of recursive sort of horror for him. So anything you can do to help him find some aspect of control, feeling of control, whatever that is going to help him. But it's always worth sort of looking at the sort of neuroplastic, notoplastic elements of pain, because they're always there, because we're a prediction machine, our brain. So and it's never going to hurt to help him find a way of sort of addressing that. So I definitely would. Thank you, Tim. I did have a question about sort of what you thought sort of one easy change in the way that that medics could use words with their patient would be. But I think we might have gone off that topic a little bit. But I
know. I think I was only laughing because it's the one easy change. I'm not sure yet. There is there are even a list of recommendations, and I did mention this. I just want to emphasise the fact that I do know why this language is expressed in this way, and there is a need for precision, and there is a need for clarity, and for communication between healthcare professionals to be quickly and easily understood for our sake, for the sake of the patient. But I think habitually an awful lot of the kind of way these things are phrased is very old-fashionedly paternalistic, and frankly patronising as well. I was shocked, as I say, when I got my health records and did that simple sort of analysis of common phrases and the most frequently used words. It was. I'm sure there was nothing in any of those letters, or in the people behind any of those letters or those notes, that was in any way intentionally patronising, paternalistic, belittling, demeaning. But that was the freight being carried by the language, and I think it's just important to step back and just consider what our stock phrases, the ones we learn, and the shorthand we use between colleagues, what the hidden implications of those forms of language are.
Tim, can I just, you said that in some of the letters it said patient denies something. Well, that is used. It's not meant that the patient I mean, you could even say the patient denies insomnia.
I know. Yeah,
it doesn't mean it does.
It had no pejorative meaning at all. Absolutely not.
No, but it sounds really bad. But I think in the olden days, patients didn't get to read these letters. So a lot of the words were like little formulas that physicians used between one another. And
we won't even go into the little acronyms that some of which are very rude.
Very rude, yeah, but quite funny.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry, David, you wanted to have a word?
Yeah, I would, because I spend a lot of my time talking to pain patients in great depth, and the one thing that doctors don't ask about is what else is going on in your life. What was happening just before in the last few months, what was happening in your early childhood, what have you had to cope with in your life, where did you think you were going, and are you still on track for that, or has it all gone south? Basically, just very crudely, just to getting to know really psychologically what is this person trying to do with their life. And just one personal example, I had central chest pain, quite acute. I hadn't had it that bad before. It's not something I have. I wondered if it was a heart attack, so I thought I'll sleep, and if I don't wake up, then it probably was. But I did wake up, so I called an ambulance. Anyway, had a wonderful day in A&E with lots and lots of different doctors, and all of them ending up with basically, it must be angina, which I understand means you've got central chest pain, and no beneficial understanding of me. I knew exactly why I had this pain. It was because 2 or 3 days before I'd had an incredible altercation with my son, who's about 3 times as big as I am, and was a real threat to me. I won't go into all the history and all the rest of it. It wasn't a physical attack. It was, in effect, a psychic attack. And I dissociated. I took myself out. My mind, my nervous system took me out of the situation. And it was so distressing to me because it had so many resonances to things that had happened to me before. But it wasn't something I got a chance to say to any of the doctors, because none of them were asking that question. What had happened to you? Well, they came out at one point. I was sitting in the waiting room for about 6 or 7 hours, going from one department to another. And they kept asking, have you been in an accident? And I say, no. I told you, I just had this central chest pain. And then they go away. But I never understood, why were they asking that? Was it my bloods were showing that I'd been in an accident, or I should have been in an accident? I don't know. I never got to discuss it with them. And also, it's very difficult to say to a doctor, look, I've been working in the pain world for 30 years in pain clinics and in all sorts of different situations, including curing a lot of pain, which is supposed to be incurable. but they don't know what I'm talking about, so they don't follow it up. It doesn't mean anything to them. I'm just another punter, a bit of an old geezer now. What do I know? Anyway, so I'm being called back to discuss some medication. So I'm going to try and have an intelligent conversation with the person, but I doubt it will actually happen. But I think the other point I wanted to make is because my daughter has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a very, very painful condition indeed, and she's been in pain most of her life. I never knew it just gradually emerged, and so I've had to learn along the way. But one of the things is with people who are neurodivergent, they have very smooth face. And when you have someone sitting in front of you with an incredibly smooth face and you say, how much pain you're in, and on a scale from 1 to 10, and they say, oh, about 20, it just doesn't match with your, if you were in pain, how could you possibly stand up, let alone talk to me? That doesn't work. There's a mismatch here. What's going on? You're obviously making it up and trying it for some kind of secondary gain, because they're not. The internal experience is devastating. She's just learned to handle it because she's had to deal with it many, many years, many, many pain crises. And it takes me back to the American Pain Association definition of pain, which is pain is what the patient says it is, rather than you trying to fit it into a box. Is it, and the differences between the different sorts of pain. I've been thinking at one point of asking my daughter to write a textbook on all the different sorts of pain that there are and how to deal with them. But anyway, those were the points I wanted to make, really. But so often there's a lot of chaos going on inside in the person and inside their life very often, or has been.
Yeah.
And pain is a reaction.
Context. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Peter.
I find that all a bit saddening, a bit sad, but we've been aware of the problems with pain language. We in this group certainly have been, which is my main contact with the pain world. This group, but for years. But shouldn't it be part of medical education to?
You think?
Do you see any? Is there any way into medical education to correct this this tendency to use bad pain language at source? I have no idea. Sam, are you involved in medical education at all?
Oh, Sam's disappeared. Oh, there you are.
You're muted.
You're muted, Sam. Well, you either disappear the picture or we got you down.
Oh dear. I think so. Sam's
lost both.
No, he's.
You can't unmute.
Yeah. Oh no. Oh. Have you got a new phone, Sam? Is that what it is?
A new phone. No.
I mean, Peter, you're entirely right, and I realise I'm preaching to the converted here, because you all are the people who are aware, and you are also well aware of the fact that in standard medical training, that very little attention has traditionally been given to pain. I've spoken to experienced clinicians who've said that they stayed in bed on the morning that pain was dealt with on their medical courses, and it did them no harm, and didn't lead to any loss of marks in their finals or anything else. So I think those situations are now. I mean, the fact that just being aware of the problem is a good way towards finding in the dark, groping in the dark towards a solution. So I think that's basically what we've been trying to do as a collective. Yeah. Just highlight the problem, and as you've said, there is also the problem of training. But if it's if the message is spoken loud, I forget who was saying it takes about 10 years for things to actually work through to sort of practical change. But
the other annoying thing, you're saying you don't like pain to be reduced to a numerical value, a number, because it seems almost meaningless. But they've done the same thing with depression and with anxiety. And every time a patient would turn up, we were instructed that we had to do a questionnaire if they're depressed. So the PHQ-9, it was 9 questions, and it was a very mechanical questionnaire, which I found quite horrible. And then you have to put the number, and they like collecting the data so they could measure whether you were getting people better or not. And I thought, I mean, I never used to do the number thing. I would just say, well, how are you? How are you feeling? You're getting anywhere. And that just seemed so much easier than making them go through these miserable questions, like how often have you thought of harming yourself this week? I mean, but it's the same thing with pain. They have to have numbers, so they like to have scores and mechanisms. So I just think it's
And I can see why, and obviously I'm only speaking for myself, but I think an awful lot of people in my position also sympathise with that, and we're not necessarily advocating that those kind of records are abandoned or you don't ask for a numerical score. It's just that perhaps that's not all
no,
that
quite.
the diagnosis and the treatment is based on.
Yeah. I mean, just asking the patient to just have a narrative conversation with you rather than trying to measure it.
And of course, time is therefore is going to be another issue there, isn't it? Because consultation time is short, and stories can be long.
We can. But it's interesting about metaphor, because people would often use metaphor,
Yeah,
but there's no
yeah.
space for putting in the metaphors on any of these forms, to do,
And of course, you the danger is you get into a situation where you're deciding what metaphors are appropriate, and they're not culturally appropriate or understood by people in different communities. So
that could be tricky.
you can solve one problem but create several more, which
Have
is
another,
again something that we're trying to avoid. I mean, I don't think there will be any hard and fast conclusion as a result of the work we're doing. As I say, it's purely from the point of view of sharing and awareness raising exercise, but from our personal perspective, an empowerment exercise and a way of giving people who have traditionally not had this voice the feeling that they can speak and they can be heard.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. So what's it you're going to publish later in the year?
We're pulling together for the remaining sort of 3 months of the project. We're pulling together a multimedia sort of short film. It'll be 15-20 minutes long. Online launch on I think the 20th of September, followed by a discussion with the people involved, and hopefully it will be shared far and wide.
Brilliant! Wow. So you've got a mix of patients and clinicians and.
No, there are no clinicians on the team. It's purely a mix of patients and professional research, academic researchers, and creatives, artistic professionals who have helped us use the medium, the various artistic mediums that we've explored to best effect.
Oh, brilliant. Sounds amazing. Sorry, Tim. So did I sorry, I had a message. Are you going to publish it? Did you?
Yeah, it's going to be there will be a standalone film that will be launched in September. I think the 20th. I keep saying the 20th, but I hope I'm right about that. But if not, don't worry, because I'll make sure the message gets shared.
So that could go on the British Pain Society web.
It will certainly be available on the Trinity Laban website. So yeah, links can be embedded to what they show. The online launch, it'll be an online and an in-person launch. I get the impression that they're hoping to have a dedicated venue, part of the university, where there will be a screening, but it will also be online, so that as many people can join as possible.
Yeah. The PPA's Pain and Rehabilitation Journal was looking to sort of branch out at getting sort of more interesting sort of publications. So you might be able to sort of look at that at some point.
Absolutely. Well, I'm open to all suggestions. The wider we can share, the better.
Give me a yell, because I'm on the editorial board, and it's something we're very eager to do, getting more lived experience voices.
Yeah,
definitely.
Touch. Thank you.
I would just add, Tim, thank you so much for that. For this particular chap, I've done another version of another hypnotic audio file which I've designed for him. If you would like also to receive it, I will happily email it, or send it your way. You can feed back if you think there's anything else I should integrate.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yes, certainly. Have you got I think do you have my email address, Sarah?
I think I do. Maureen, I'm sure will be able to remind me.
I can send
Thank you. Yeah,
I'm very happy
I'd
to.
be very interested.
Yes, because I think anything can help. I'll be great. Grateful if you let me know if it does. But
is he a good hypnotic subject?
No, he has been. And I think the difficulty is that I'm never quite able to be there enough. So I think the audiophile mode is probably the best way forward for him. But I'm hoping that I finessed it, put it to music, and it's quite a longer one than some of the others. So hopefully that might help.
Wow.
But we've had a discussion with what he thinks in terms of the metaphors I'm using might help him, which alludes to carrying a huge amount of weight in terms of boulders that he could maybe let go of out of this burden, his shouldering so many burdens that maybe those lifestyle background issues that we were alluding to elsewhere in the conversation, that are the composites behind the scenes to exacerbate some aspects of his pain. But yes, so I sort of blended a lot of things that I hope will help.
So were they his metaphors, the boulders?
Well, I was sort of trying to explore. He's not a terribly forthcoming fellow.
Oh yeah.
So in the end, I was sort of like, so what about if I said no? And he's, oh, I like that one. Yes, no, I think that would work. And,
okay.
So I was definitely trying to get him on board, but I think the trouble is that because he's obviously in a lot of pain, he's and we were alluding to the different sorts of pain that people can have, and how the pain can be felt within your brain by the receiver as opposed to the stimulus. He's had various local anesthetic injections which have helped very temporarily with one aspect of his pain, but clearly the neuropathic elements aren't quite shut down. So I think again I've tried to blend in that sort of prolongation and reconnection to what happens with the anesthetic, and maybe recalling some of that as well. So yes, we'll see whether that can help in some way for him. But
really interesting.
Fear that he's actually got recurrence now as time has gone on. I think that the underlying problem is actually that I haven't managed to wipe out his cancer, and that's the fundamental problem really.
Okay.
So, but he's still got to go forward with all of that.
Have you tried the red light?
I had yes, because the trouble is I've mentioned it, but he hasn't been able to procure his own. So actually, literally last week, one of my my other patients came and donated one of theirs for him. So I took it straight round.
Okay.
So we'll see whether that's
see how that works
a bit. But yeah.
Brilliant. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that works with him.
Yeah.
Okay. So anybody else got any ideas or suggestions? Or I remember a while ago I had a patient who reminded me with the boulders. He was a young man with lots of stuff in his early life, and he was just miserable all the time. And he said it was like pulling this boulder around on a rope. And we did a little trance, and I said, well, have you thought about just cutting the rope? And that kind of worked, hadn't thought of doing that. And it's sort of interesting how, I didn't really know what everything was, because you didn't.
Well, exactly. So
you just, if you've got a metaphor, you can sort of play with that a little bit, or putting the magic cream onto things, or
well, I think this poor fellow. I mean, one. I think I was trying to work out with him without putting too many words in his mouth, but Bara sitting there in silence with each other, with me, with pen poised above paper or whatever to take down his words of wisdom, I ended up sort of, saying, "And what about this? And what about that?" And I think, I can foresee that there's this huge existential angst. There's a whole load of, what's going to happen with his family and all of these other things, that people possibly don't even want to articulate, or
no.
But
It's too
yeah,
hard,
I think I'm just going to be trying to keep the black box phenomena and the boulders, as a very useful sort of metaphor.
See what
happens. Yeah,
absolutely. Lovely. Okay. Thank you,
thank you.
everybody. I think we'll just call it a day. Anybody got any last moment comments?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah,
Tim, that was great. So interesting. And we look forward
pleasure.
to hearing
Thank
the
you.
movie. And any other news, send me and I'll send it off out to everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you. I will.
Tim, I was still singing.
A big pardon?
I was still singing semi-professionally.
Singing?
My singing? How is it? Sorry, I missed the first.
I was still going. I was still doing that.
I am still singing, but not any professional or semi-professional capacity, I'm afraid. Those days have long gone.
Oh.
You're turfed out of the cathedral choirs when you're 50 now. Or you have to re-audition and
Really?
Ages are very well. Well, two things. I mean, my voice has deteriorated with age, but it's also my condition. I mean, you don't. Well, I say you don't. I'm used to telling people they don't realise that the synovial fluid in your larynx can inflame just as it can around any other joint, and has done, and left me kind of literally speechless, voiceless on occasion. So I can't rely on my voice anymore, I'm afraid. But
so we
look back.
We don't have any more meetings. We never will get around to singing our duet.
We've got to have another meeting just to do that.
Yeah.
The bold gendarme, wasn't it?
Right, you're booked.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Brilliant. Okay, guys, everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Nice to see you, Sam. Sorry we couldn't hear you. Anyway, techno problems. Okay, bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.